The harsh wind carried dust and danger as Katherine Armstrong stared defiantly at the collapsing barn roof that had just nearly claimed her life. Her hands bled from splinters, her auburn hair wild from the effort of trying to shore up the beams alone. This drought-stricken ranch in Montana Territory, 1878, was all she had left of her father's dreams, and she'd be damned if she'd let it slip away. "That beam won't hold another day, madam," came a deep voice from behind her. Katherine whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for the pistol at her hip. A stranger sat atop a chestnut gelding trail dust coating his denim and leather. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed Stetson, but she could see he hadn't shaved in days. "I didn't ask your opinion," she replied coldly, "and I don't recall inviting you onto my property." The man dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "Name's Gabriel Adams, was riding by when I heard the crash." His eyes, remarkably blue against his sun-darkened skin, assessed the damage. "You're lucky you weren't underneath when it gave way." Katherine tightened her jaw. "I've managed this ranch alone for 2 years. I'll handle a broken roof beam just fine." Gabriel removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. "No disrespect intended, but that's not a one-person job. Even with 2 of us, it'll be challenging." "I don't need help," Katherine said, turning back to the ruins of her barn, willing her voice not to betray the exhaustion seeping through her bones. Gabriel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried over the prairie wind. "Then let me just be here anyway." Something in his tone made Katherine pause. Not pity, she'd have sent him packing for that, but a simple offering, devoid of judgment. The drought had been merciless. Cattle prices had plummeted. Her nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when winter would arrive in mere months. "Fine," she conceded, not looking at him, "but I'm not paying you." Wasn't asking for payment. He was already rolling up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. "Got any tools that survived the collapse?" By sunset, they had salvaged what they could from the barn. Katherine's back ached as she straightened, watching Gabriel expertly sort through usable lumber. He worked efficiently, without unnecessary talk, which suited her fine. "We'll need to start fresh tomorrow," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "These support beams are shot." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "I agreed to your help today." Gabriel's mouth quirked slightly. "Yes, madam. But unless you've got more hands coming tomorrow, that roof won't rebuild itself." Katherine hesitated. Her father had taught her never to trust wandering men. The West was full of opportunists, and a woman alone was vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked bluntly. Gabriel looked at her directly. "Because 6 months ago I needed help and didn't get it, lost my homestead claim because of it." He gestured to the horizon. "Just passing through, headed to Oregon, figured I could spare a few days." Katherine studied him, searching for deception. "1 more day," she finally said. "You can sleep in the stable, what's left of it." "Appreciated," he replied, gathering his saddlebags. "I've slept worse places." Katherine walked back to her small cabin, feeling his eyes on her back. She told herself the flutter in her stomach was hunger, nothing more. Dawn broke with Gabriel already at work, hauling timber from the woodpile. Katherine brought him coffee, which he accepted with a nod of thanks. "I've been thinking about the design," he said, sketching in the dirt with a stick. "We could reinforce these corners, make it stronger than before." Katherine crouched beside him, her skirts gathering dust. "That would take twice the lumber." "Not if we salvage the north wall, it's still solid." She frowned. "How do you know about building barns?" Gabriel took a sip of coffee. "Worked as a carpenter's apprentice back in Pennsylvania before the war. Came west afterward like everyone else, looking for a fresh start." "The war?" Katherine couldn't help asking. "You fought," a shadow passed over his face. "Union. 118th Pennsylvania was at Gettysburg." His tone discouraged further questions. They worked side by side through the morning. Katherine was surprised to find herself falling into rhythm with him, anticipating his needs for tools or support. By midday, the frame of the new barn wall was taking shape. "You handle a hammer better than most men I've known," Gabriel commented as they paused for water. Katherine wiped her brow with her sleeve. "My father believed daughters should know everything sons know, said independence was the greatest gift he could give me. Smart man. He was." She passed him the water dipper. "Until he wasn't, gold fever got him, went to the Black Hills in '76, never came back." Gabriel nodded solemnly. "Many didn't. The irony is he left to make our lives better, had this grand plan to strike it rich, buy more land." Katherine gestured to the struggling ranch around them. "Instead, I got this and a mountain of debt. Yet you're still here." "Where else would I go?" she asked, more to herself than him. They resumed work, but something had shifted. Katherine found herself watching the way Gabriel's hands moved, confident, skilled, gentle with the wood in a way that seemed at odds with his weathered exterior. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Gabriel eyed them warily. "Storm's coming. We should secure what we've built." They worked frantically as the wind picked up, tying down loose timber and covering the frame with tarpaulins. The first heavy drops began to fall as they finished. "Inside," Katherine called over the rising wind. Now, they raced to the cabin, the sky opening up just as they reached the porch. Katherine's heart lifted at the sound of rain hammering the roof. After months of drought, the land was finally drinking. Gabriel stood on the porch, rain plastering his shirt to his body. He closed his eyes, face tilted upward. Someone's prayers got answered. Katherine found herself staring at him, at the relief in his expression that mirrored her own. For the first time, she allowed herself to see him fully. The faint scar along his jawline, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't always been so serious, the gentle way he held himself despite his obvious strength. "You should come in," she said, surprising herself. "Get dry." Inside, the cabin was small but meticulously kept. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with two chairs drawn close. A curtain separated her sleeping area from the main room. Gabriel stood awkwardly, dripping on her floor. Katherine handed him a towel and gestured to the fire. "Warm yourself." "I'll make coffee." As she busied herself at the stove, she felt strangely self-conscious. It had been years since a man had been inside her home. The last had been the banker, coming to explain that her father's debts now fell to her. Gabriel removed his soaked shirt, keeping his back to her out of propriety. Katherine couldn't help noticing the scars, their long, thin marks that could only have come from a lash. "Prison?" she asked before she could stop herself. He stiffened. "Confederate camp. Libby Prison, 1864. Katherine swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, it's fine." He pulled on a dry shirt from his saddlebags. "Long time ago." The rain continued as they shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Katherine found herself telling him about her childhood in Missouri, her mother's death from influenza, the journey west with her father. "He was full of dreams," she said, staring into her coffee cup. "Always looking to the horizon, never quite satisfied with what he had." "And you?" Gabriel asked quietly. Katherine considered the question. "I just wanted roots. Somewhere that wouldn't wash away with the next flood or burn in the next fire." "Is that why you're so determined to save this place?" She nodded. "It's not much, but it's mine, or will be once I pay off the bank." Gabriel studied her. "You're different from most women I've met. Is that good or bad?" she asked, feeling unexpectedly vulnerable. "Just is." His smile was slight but genuine. "Reminds me of my sister, same determination." "Where is she now?" "Philadelphia, married a doctor." "Has 3 children I've never met." There was longing in his voice. "We write sometimes." "Why haven't you gone back?" Gabriel's face closed. "Some ghosts are best left undisturbed." The rain drummed steadily as silence fell between them. There was comfort in it, Katherine realized, sitting with someone who didn't demand conversation. "You should take the bed," she said finally. "I can sleep by the fire." Gabriel shook his head firmly. "Wouldn't dream of it. The floor suits me fine." Katherine didn't argue further. She moved behind the curtain, changing into her nightgown with careful movements. aware of his presence just feet away. As she lay in bed listening to him settle by the fire, she wondered what strange fate had brought him to her door on this particular day. The storm raged through the night. Katherine woke once to the sound of Gabriel murmuring in his sleep, words she couldn't understand but recognized as a soldier's nightmares. She almost went to him, then stopped herself. Comfort was an intimacy she wasn't prepared to offer. Morning brought sunshine and steam rising from the saturated earth. Gabriel was already outside when Katherine emerged from the cabin, surveying their work from the previous day. "Rain didn't do much damage," he called. "We caught a break." Katherine nodded, bringing him coffee. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the cup, sending an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the hot liquid. "Thank you," she said softly. "For staying." Gabriel met her eyes. "Thank you for letting me." They worked through the day, making remarkable progress. Katherine found herself laughing at Gabriel's dry observations about the local wildlife that had taken interest in their project, particularly a persistent squirrel that seemed determined to supervise. "Reminds me of a sergeant I had," Gabriel commented as the squirrel chattered angrily at him for moving a board. "Always had something to say about how things should be done." By late afternoon, the basic structure of the barn was complete. Katherine stood back, surveying their work with satisfaction. "Not bad for two people," she admitted. "We make a good team," Gabriel said, and something in his tone made her look at him sharply. His expression was open, unguarded for once. "I suppose we do," she agreed, feeling a strange flutter in her chest. That evening, Katherine surprised herself by suggesting they ride into town for supplies and perhaps a proper meal at the hotel restaurant. Gabriel accepted with a grace that suggested he understood the significance of her invitation. Pine Creek was hardly more than a wide spot in the trail, a general store, saloon, small hotel, and a handful of other businesses strung along a single dusty street. Katherine was uncomfortably aware of the stairs as they rode in together. A woman alone was already the subject of gossip. A woman with an unknown man was scandal in the making. Mrs. Guthrie at the general store made no attempt to hide her curiosity as Katherine purchased nails, tar paper, and other supplies. "Heard you had some trouble out at your place, Miss Armstrong," she said, eyeing Gabriel, who was examining tools across the store. "Barn collapse, was it?" "Nothing I can't handle," Katherine replied evenly. "Of course, dear." Mrs. Guthrie's tone suggested otherwise. "And your friend, he's helping you." "Mr. Adams is passing through. He's been kind enough to lend a hand." Mrs. Guthrie's eyebrows rose. "Indeed, very neighborly of him." Katherine paid for her purchases quickly, irritation tightening her shoulders. Outside, she found Gabriel already mounted and waiting. "Problem?" he asked, noting her expression. "Nothing new. Small towns run on gossip." Gabriel glanced back at the store window where Mrs. Guthrie was watching them. "Ah, and I've just provided them with a week's worth, I imagine." "At least," Katherine agreed, mounting her horse. Gabriel surprised her by chuckling. "Well, might as well give them something worth talking about. Still want that dinner at the hotel." Despite herself, Katherine smiled. "Absolutely." The hotel dining room was modest but clean, with actual tablecloths and real china luxuries Katherine rarely indulged in. They attracted curious glances from the few other diners, but Gabriel seemed unperturbed, holding her chair with natural courtesy. "When was the last time you ate in a restaurant?" he asked as they studied the limited menu. Katherine thought about it. 2 years, no 3, before Father left." "Too long," Gabriel said decisively. "Order whatever you want, my treat." She started to protest, but he raised a hand. "Please, let me do this. You've provided shelter and company. It's the least I can offer." The steak was perfectly cooked, the potatoes buttery, the coffee strong and hot. Katherine found herself relaxing as they ate, sharing stories of cattle drives and the characters she'd encountered. There was this old cowhand Dusty. Everyone called him who could predict rain 3 days out just by how his wooden leg ached, she recalled, smiling at the memory. Father thought it was nonsense until Dusty saved our herd from a flash flood. Gabriel laughed, the sound warming her more than the coffee. I knew a fellow like that in the army. Could tell when the enemy was moving by how his missing finger tingled the one that wasn't there anymore. As they lingered over dessert actual apple pie, a rare treat, Katherine realized she was enjoying herself more than she had in years. Gabriel was an attentive listener, drawing her out with questions that showed genuine interest in her answers. It was only when they stepped outside, the evening air cool against her skin, that reality intruded. Sheriff Mills stood by their horses, his expression unreadable. "Evening, Miss Armstrong," he said, tipping his hat. "Heard you had some trouble out at your place." "Nothing serious, Sheriff," Katherine replied, tension returning to her shoulders. "Just a barn repair." Mills' gaze shifted to Gabriel, assessing. "Don't believe we've met, Mr. Adams, Gabriel Adams." Gabriel extended his hand, which the sheriff took after a moment's hesitation. "Passing through." The question was casual, but Katherine heard the suspicion underneath. "Lending a hand with Miss Armstrong's barn, then continuing west." Mills nodded slowly. "We've had some cattle rustling in the area. Strangers tend to catch my attention." "Understandable," Gabriel replied evenly. "But I assure you my interests lie solely in carpentry, not cattle." The sheriff held his gaze a moment longer before turning back to Katherine. "You be careful out there, Miss Armstrong. Ranch is pretty isolated." The implication was clear. Katherine straightened, her voice cool. "I always am, Sheriff. Good evening." They rode out of town in silence, the sheriff's warning hanging between them. Finally, Gabriel spoke. "He's right to be cautious. You don't know me." Katherine glanced at him in the fading light. "I'm a good judge of character." "Are you?" Gabriel's voice was serious. "You've known me 2 days, Katherine." It was the first time he'd used her given name. It sounded different in his mouth, softer, almost intimate. "Long enough to know you're not a cattle rustler," she replied. "Unless your plan involves rebuilding my barn first, which seems unnecessarily complicated." That earned her a chuckle. "Fair point." They rode in companionable silence as stars appeared overhead. Katherine found herself wishing the ride would last longer, stretching out the strange bubble of time they'd created, away from the loneliness of her everyday existence. At the ranch, Gabriel helped her unload the supplies before tending to the horses. Katherine watched him move in the lamplight, his movements gentle with the animals, speaking to them in low tones. "You're good with them," she observed. Gabriel stroked her mare's nose. "Always liked horses. They don't care who you were or what you did, only how you treat them now." "Is that why you're heading to Oregon? For a fresh start where nobody knows you?" He considered her question. "Partly. There's land available there. Thought I might try ranching again." "What happened to your last place?" Katherine asked, remembering his mention of losing a homestead. Gabriel's expression darkened. "Drought, debt, then a fire that took what was left," he shrugged. "Story as old as the West itself." "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. Made me who I am now." He secured the stable door and brought me here. The way he looked at her made Katherine's breath catch. There was something in his eyes, a question perhaps, or an offering. She wasn't ready to acknowledge either. "We should get some rest," she said, stepping back. "Tomorrow will be another long day," he nodded, respecting her retreat. "Good night, Katherine." She paused at the cabin door. "Gabriel, thank you for dinner. It was nice." His smile was gentle in the moonlight. It was. The following days fell into a rhythm. They would work from dawn until dusk, breaking only for meals. The barn took shape rapidly under Gabriel's skilled direction, and Katherine found herself learning techniques her father had never taught her. "Like this," Gabriel would say, guiding her hands on a saw or showing her how to test a joint for strength. She was keenly aware of his proximity in those moments, the clean scent of him, the controlled power in his movements. On the 4th day, as they were shingling the roof, Gabriel paused, staring toward the horizon. "Riders coming," Katherine shaded her eyes. 3 men on horseback approached, and her heart sank as she recognized the lead figure. "Thompson," she muttered. From the bank, Gabriel cast her a questioning look. Holds my mortgage, she explained tersely. Keeps trying to buy me out. By the time the men reached the yard, Katherine and Gabriel had descended from the roof. She straightened her clothes as best she could, conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Miss Armstrong," Thompson called, dismounting with the smooth confidence of a man used to getting his way. He was expensively dressed for frontier standards, his vest brocaded, his boots polished. "Quite a project you have underway, Mr. Thompson," she acknowledged coolly. "Just some necessary repairs." Thompson's eyes flicked to Gabriel, assessing. "I see you found help. Wise decision." The two men with Thompson remained mounted, silent and watchful. One Katherine recognized as Thompson's clerk, the other was a stranger with hard eyes that made her uneasy. "What brings you out this way?" she asked, though she already knew. Thompson smiled thinly. "Business, I'm afraid." "Your payment is overdue." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I told you when I was in town last month I need until the cattle sale, 2 more weeks." "Yes, you did," Thompson sighed, as if genuinely regretful. "Unfortunately, the bank's board is growing, impatient. They've authorized me to make you a final offer." He named a figure that would barely cover her debts, leaving her nothing to start over with. "That's robbery," she said flatly. Thompson shrugged. "It's the market. Droughts affected everyone." Gabriel stepped forward. "Seems convenient that your market price is exactly what she owes, plus a pittance." Thompson's gaze hardened as he turned to Gabriel. "I don't believe we've been introduced, Mr. Adams," Gabriel supplied, not offering his hand. "Mr. Adams, this is a private business matter between Miss Armstrong and the First Bank of Pine Creek." "Interesting timing," Gabriel continued as if Thompson hadn't spoken. "Showing up just as she's rebuilding, almost like you knew she was improving the property." The third man shifted in his saddle, and Katherine noticed his right hand drift toward his holster. "Your friend should be careful about making accusations," Thompson said to Katherine, his voice dangerously soft. Katherine moved slightly, positioning herself beside Gabriel. "Mr. Adams is helping me repair storm damage, Mr. Thompson. As you can see, we're making good progress. I'll have your payment after the cattle sale as agreed." "There was no agreement, Miss Armstrong. There was a request for extension, which I'm not obligated to grant." Gabriel's voice was calm. "Seems to me a bank would rather have a paying customer than a piece of land they'll have to sell in a down market." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "And it seems to me that drifters should mind their own business." The tension stretched between them until Thompson finally turned back to Katherine. 2 weeks, Miss Armstrong, not 1 day more." He mounted his horse. "I suggest you consider my offer in the meantime." They watched in silence as the 3 men rode away. Once they were out of earshot, Katherine released a shaky breath. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing with me." Gabriel's expression was grim. "Men like that only understand strength. If you'd shown weakness, he'd have pressed harder." "I know his type well enough," Katherine agreed. "My father dealt with them often, usually ending up on the losing side." "Do you have the cattle to make the payment?" Katherine hesitated. "Barely, if prices hold." Gabriel studied her. "You shouldn't have to live payment to payment." "Few people get what they should have," she replied, turning back toward the barn. "We still have work to finish." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Gabriel broached the subject again. "Have you considered selling, starting fresh somewhere else?" Katherine shook her head. "This land was my father's dream. He's buried on that hill." She pointed to a small rise where a solitary tree stood. "I can't just abandon it. Even if staying means always struggling." She turned to look at him, moonlight silvering his features. "Isn't that what life is? A series of struggles we choose because they matter to us." Gabriel was silent for a long moment. "Some would say that's a lonely way to live." "It can be," she admitted, "but it's the choice I've made." He nodded slowly. "I respect that, more than you know." Katherine felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of kindred spirits. 2 people who understood what it meant to stand their ground, even when standing alone. "Will you tell me," she asked softly, "what happened after the war, the real story?" Gabriel stared into the darkness. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "I came home changed," he finally said. "My family didn't recognize the man who returned. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stand crowds, saw threats everywhere." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous gesture she hadn't noticed before. "My father thought I should simply get over it, go back to carpentry, marry the girl I'd left behind. But you couldn't." "I tried," he said simply, "for almost a year. Then one night, I woke up with my hands around Elizabeth's throat, my fiancée. I was still half in a nightmare about Libby prison." His voice dropped. "I left the next morning, headed west like so many others looking to outrun their ghosts." Katherine felt her heart ache for the young man he'd been. "Have you outrun them?" Gabriel's smile was sad. "Some days, others they catch up to me." Without thinking, she reached for his hand, her fingers closing around his. "I'm sorry." He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Katherine," he said, her name a question in itself. She didn't pull away when he leaned closer, his free hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. His kiss was tentative at first, giving her every chance to retreat. Instead, she found herself responding, leaning into him as something long dormant within her awakened. When they finally parted, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't come here looking for this," he whispered. "Neither did I," she answered truthfully. They stayed on the porch, talking until the moon was high overhead. Gabriel told her more about his family in Philadelphia, his time as a soldier, the years of wandering afterward. Katherine shared memories of her mother, her father's boom and bust cycles, her determination to make the ranch succeed where he had failed. It was well past midnight when they finally rose. At her door, Gabriel kissed her again, more confidently this time. "Good night," he murmured against her lips. "Good night," she echoed, watching him walk toward the stable, her body humming with sensations long forgotten. The next morning brought a different kind of tension. They worked side by side as before, but now every accidental touch held meaning, every glance an unspoken question. By midday, the barn's exterior was complete, lacking only doors and internal fixtures. "We'll finish tomorrow," Gabriel said, surveying their work. "It's solid. Should last you decades." The word hung between them, decades, far longer than the few days of his promised help. "What then?" Katherine asked, the question encompassing far more than construction plans. Gabriel met her gaze. "That depends. On whether you're still determined to face everything alone." Katherine looked away. "It's not about determination, it's about reality. This is my land, my responsibility." "Having help doesn't change that," Gabriel said quietly. "It just means you don't have to carry it all by yourself." "Until the help leaves," she replied, voicing her deepest fear. "Everyone leaves eventually, Gabriel." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "Is that what you think I'll do?" Katherine faced him squarely. "Won't you? Oregon is still waiting. Plans can change. Based on what? A few days of work, a kiss." She shook her head. "That's not enough reason to alter your life." Gabriel's voice softened. "What if I said I've found something here I wasn't looking for, something worth staying for?" Katherine's heart thundered in her chest. "I would say you barely know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know you love this land with a fierceness that amazes me. I know when you laugh, really laugh, it's the most beautiful sound I've heard in years." His words stole her breath. "Gabriel, I'm not asking for promises," he continued. "Just time. Time to see if what I'm feeling, what I think we're both feeling, is real." Katherine wanted to believe him, wanted it with an intensity that frightened her, but years of self-reliance had built walls not easily dismantled. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is all happening so fast." Gabriel nodded, respecting her hesitation. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere, not until you ask me to." The afternoon stretched into evening, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. They worked in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As dusk fell, Katherine suggested they ride out to check the cattle in the south pasture. I need to make sure they have enough water after all this heat, she explained. They rode side by side across the rolling grassland. Despite the drought, recent rains had brought touches of green back to the parched earth. Wildflowers dotted the hillsides, splashes of color against the golden grasses. At the stock pond, they dismounted to let the horses drink. The cattle, seeing them approach, lumbered over for inspection. Katherine counted heads, relieved to find none missing. They look healthy, Gabriel observed. Good weight on them. They should bring fair prices, Katherine agreed, if nothing goes wrong between now and the drive. Always the optimist, Gabriel teased gently. Katherine smiled despite herself. In my experience, preparing for the worst rarely disappoints. And what's the worst that could happen now? He asked, his tone still light but his eyes serious. She met his gaze. I could start believing in possibilities that don't exist. Gabriel stepped closer. Or you could start believing in ones that do. Before she could respond, gunfire cracked the evening silence. Katherine's mare reared, startled by the sound. Gabriel moved instantly, pulling Katherine down behind a rocky outcropping as a second shot kicked up dirt near their feet. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his revolver. Katherine already had her pistol in hand. Where are they? Gabriel peered carefully around the rocks. Ridge to the east. Can't tell how many. Another shot rang out, closer this time. The cattle began to scatter, their nervous lowing adding to the chaos. They're trying to stampede the herd, Katherine realized with growing horror. Her entire future depended on these animals making it to market. Gabriel's expression hardened, or create enough confusion to steal them, he glanced at her. Thompson, possibly, she admitted. Wouldn't be the first time a banker arranged for troubles to force a foreclosure, a voice called from the ridge. Adams, we know you're there. Gabriel and Katherine exchanged startled looks. They're after you, she whispered, his face had gone deadly serious. Stay here, I'll draw them off. No, she grabbed his arm, we don't know how many there are, the voice called again. This doesn't concern the woman, Adams. Just you and the money you stole, Katherine stared at Gabriel, whose expression had turned to granite. What is he talking about? A misunderstanding, Gabriel said tightly. From Wyoming territory. Money you stole, Katherine repeated, pulling away from him slightly. Gabriel's eyes never left the ridge. I worked for a cattle outfit near Cheyenne. The owner accused me of stealing from the payroll. I didn't, but he had the sheriff in his pocket. His jaw clenched. I left rather than hang for something I didn't do. Are they bounty hunters or hired guns? Either way, they've been tracking me. Gabriel looked at her, regret clear in his eyes. I'm sorry, Katherine, I never meant to bring this to your door. Another shot, closer still. They couldn't stay pinned down much longer. How many bullets do you have? Katherine asked, her mind racing. 6. You, 5. She peered around the rock. The draw to our left leads back toward the creek. If we can reach it, we'll have cover all the way to the trees. Gabriel nodded. I'll lay down covering fire. When I say go, run for it. Don't stop, don't look back. Together, Katherine insisted. I'm not leaving you here. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, then he nodded. On 3, 1, 2, 3, they broke cover together, Gabriel firing twice toward the ridge as they ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around them as they sprinted for the draw. Katherine's lungs burned, her skirts hampering her movements. Gabriel stayed slightly behind her, using his body as a shield. They reached the shallow ravine and tumbled down its side, landing in a tangle of limbs at the bottom. For a moment they lay still, catching their breath, listening. The gunfire had stopped. They'll be coming down, Gabriel whispered. We need to keep moving. As they crept along the draw, staying low, Katherine processed what she'd learned. Gabriel was wanted wrongfully if his story was true. But true or not, he'd brought danger to her land, to her cattle, to her. You should have told me, she said as they paused to listen again. Gabriel's expression was grim. Would you have let me stay if I had? Katherine didn't answer immediately. I don't know. That's why I didn't tell you. He checked around a bend in the ravine. Clear so far. They continued in tense silence until they reached the creek. The water was low from the drought, but the cottonwoods along its banks provided good cover. The ranch is 2 miles that way, Katherine whispered, pointing north. But they'll expect that, Gabriel nodded. We need to split up. No, she said firmly. That's exactly what they want. Katherine, they're after me, not you. If we separate, they shot at me too, she reminded him. And they're threatening my cattle. I'm already involved. Gabriel looked like he wanted to argue further, but voices in the distance made them both freeze. The pursuers were closer than they'd thought. This way, Katherine mouthed, leading him deeper into the trees. They moved as quietly as possible, staying in the shadows. The creek bent westward, away from the ranch but toward a line of hills that offered better defensive positions. Old mining cabin up ahead, Katherine whispered. Used to be a silver prospect. Father bought the claim when it went bust. The cabin was little more than a shack, half reclaimed by nature. Its door hung crooked on leather hinges, but it offered concealment and potentially weapons or supplies. They slipped inside, Gabriel immediately checking the perimeter while Katherine searched for anything useful. She found an ancient shotgun and a handful of shells behind a rotting cupboard. Will it fire? Gabriel asked skeptically, eyeing the rusted weapon. Katherine broke it open, checking the mechanism. Possibly once, he almost smiled. Better than nothing. As darkness fell, they positioned themselves with clear views of the approaches. The temperature dropped and Katherine shivered in her thin blouse. Gabriel removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Take it, I'm fine. The gesture reminded her that despite everything he'd protected her, had tried to draw danger away from her. Whatever his past, his concern for her safety seemed genuine. These men, she said quietly, if they're bounty hunters, they won't stop coming. Gabriel nodded, his face shadowed in the darkness. I know. What will you do? He was silent for a long moment. I can't keep running forever. You could clear your name, Katherine suggested. Return to Wyoming, prove your innocence. Gabriel's bitter laugh held no humor. With what evidence? The money's gone, either stolen by someone else or hidden by the owner himself to avoid paying his men. My word against his, and he owns half the territory. Katherine processed this. Then what's your plan? Originally, reach Oregon, start fresh where no one knew me. He glanced at her, his expression softening. Then I met you, and suddenly Oregon seemed very far away. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Before Katherine could respond, a twig snapped outside. They both tensed, weapons ready. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. Not trying to hide their presence. Adams, a voice called, we know you're in there, come out and face it like a man. Gabriel and Katherine exchanged glances. He held up 3 fingers, 3 men outside, bad odds. If I surrender, Gabriel whispered, they might leave you alone. And if they don't, Katherine countered. If they're willing to kill for whatever bounty is on your head, what's to stop them from eliminating witnesses? Gabriel's face tightened because she was right. These weren't lawmen, they were guns for hire. Adams, the voice called again. Last chance before we burn you out, Gabriel's eyes widened. Fire would leave them no choice but to flee directly into their pursuers' guns. I have a plan, Katherine whispered urgently. Play along. Before Gabriel could stop her, she called out, he's wounded, I need help. Gabriel stared at her in confusion, but she silenced him with a look, hesitation from outside. Then, lady, step out where we can see you. Katherine moved to the door, positioning herself in the frame but keeping most of her body shielded. Gabriel stayed hidden, shotgun ready. He took a bullet crossing the creek, she called, infusing her voice with distress. He's losing blood, I can't move him alone. Murmured consultation outside, then the leader's voice again. Throw out his gun, then come out with your hands up. Katherine made a show of reaching for something, then tossed a piece of firewood that clattered convincingly in the darkness. She stepped outside slowly, hands raised. 3 men stood in a semicircle, rifles trained on her. She recognized one as the hard-eyed man who had accompanied Thompson earlier. Where is he? Demanded the leader, a weather-beaten man with a scar running from eye to jaw. Inside, Katherine replied, letting her voice shake. Please, he needs a doctor. The leader gestured to the youngest of the 3. Check it out. As the man approached the cabin, Katherine tensed. Everything depended on timing. The young gunman reached the doorway, peering cautiously into the darkness. The moment he stepped inside, there was a scuffle, then silence. "Jennings?" the leader called, suspicious now. When no answer came, he raised his rifle. "Lady, you just made a big mistake." Gabriel's voice rang out from the darkness. "Drop your weapons or Jennings dies." The remaining men exchanged glances. The leader's face hardened. "You're bluffing, Adams." In answer, Gabriel pushed the young gunman into the doorway, shotgun pressed to his head. Even in the dim light, Katherine could see the fear on Jennings' face. "Doesn't look like a bluff to me," Gabriel said coldly. "Drop them, now." A tense standoff ensued. Katherine edged slowly toward the leader's horse, which was tethered nearby. "Even if you kill us," the leader said, "others will come. Price on your head just went up after that bank job in Casper." Gabriel stiffened. "I had nothing to do with any bank job." "Tell it to the judge," the second man sneered. "Witnesses put you there." Katherine reached the horse, her hand finding the saddlebag. If these men were bounty hunters they'd carry. Her fingers closed around paper wanted posters. She extracted one, straining to see in the faint moonlight. "This isn't Gabriel," she said, staring at the crude drawing. "It doesn't even look like him." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Lady, that's Gabriel Adams right there, wanted for theft in Cheyenne and bank robbery in Casper." "My name is Gabriel Adams," Gabriel confirmed. "But I've never been to Casper and I didn't rob any bank." Katherine studied the poster more closely. "This man is described as having a burned scar on his left hand and stands over 6 feet tall." She looked up. "Gabriel has no such scar and he's not 6 feet. Doubt flickered across the leader's face. "He matches the description from Cheyenne. Brown hair, blue eyes, and a beard," Katherine said dryly. "That describes half the men in the territory." The standoff stretched for several more tense moments before the leader lowered his rifle slightly. "If you're not the Adams who robbed the Casper Bank, then who is?" "I have no idea," Gabriel replied, "but I can prove I wasn't in Casper. I was working at the Rockingham Ranch outside Cheyenne until 4 months ago when the owner accused me of theft." "Michael's place?" the second man asked. Gabriel nodded cautiously. "Vernon Michaels, mean son of a," he caught himself, "not a fair employer." The men exchanged glances. "Michaels has a reputation," the leader admitted. "Not many hands stay with him long." "For good reason," Gabriel said grimly. "He shorts wages, works men half to death, then finds excuses not to pay them. When the payroll came up light, he blamed me rather than admit he'd gambled it away." Katherine saw the men considering this. Clearly Michael's reputation lent credibility to Gabriel's claim. "The bank robbery was 3 months ago," the leader said slowly. "If you were already on the run from Cheyenne." "I was in Idaho," Gabriel said, "working a lumber camp. There are witnesses." The leader lowered his rifle completely. "Jennings, you hurt?" "No," came the sullen reply from the doorway. "Let him go, Adams. Seems we need to talk." Cautiously, Gabriel released the young man, though he kept the shotgun ready. The 5 of them formed an uneasy circle in the clearing. "Vernon Michaels is offering $500 for your capture," the leader said. "Dead or alive," Gabriel's jaw tightened. "For money I didn't take." "Maybe," the leader conceded, "but someone using your name robbed the Casper Bank, killed a guard. There's a $1,000 bounty on that one." "It wasn't me," Gabriel insisted. "Convenient having someone else's crimes on your head," the leader observed. Katherine stepped forward. "Or inconvenient if you're the real Gabriel Adams." The conversation continued well into the night. The bounty hunters that's what they were had been tracking Gabriel for weeks based on Michael's warrant. The bank robbery had been a lucky coincidence. They'd assumed both crimes were committed by the same man. "So you're just going to let me go?" Gabriel asked skeptically as the discussion wound down. The leader, who had introduced himself as Morgan, shrugged. "You're not worth the trouble, Adams. Not if there's doubt about the identification. I don't collect bounties on innocent men." "How noble," Katherine murmured. Morgan's gaze sharpened. Just business, madam. No profit in bringing in the wrong man gets a hunter a bad reputation. What about Michaels? Gabriel pressed. He'll just hire someone else. Probably, Morgan agreed, but I'll spread the word that there's confusion about which Adams is which. Might buy you some time. As dawn broke, the bounty hunters prepared to leave. Morgan approached Gabriel one last time. Word of advice, Adams, clear your name or change it. You can't outrun trouble forever. Gabriel nodded grimly. Believe me, I know. They watched the three men ride away, tension slowly bleeding from their bodies as the hoofbeats faded into the distance. You think they're really letting it go? Katherine asked quietly. Gabriel sighed. For now, Morgan's right, there's no profit in the wrong man. But Michaels won't stop, and whoever used my name for that bank job is still out there. Katherine studied his face in the morning light. Despite everything, she found she still trusted him. His story rang true, and he'd had multiple opportunities to abandon her to save himself. Instead, he'd stayed, protected her. What will you do now? She asked. Gabriel looked at her, his expression unreadable. That depends. On whether there's a reason to stay and face this, or whether Oregon is still my best option. Katherine heard the question beneath his words. She thought of her ranch, her independence, her solitary existence. Then she thought of the past week of shared labor and laughter, of feeling truly seen for the first time in years. I still have a barn to finish, she said slowly, and a cattle drive to organize. Gabriel waited, understanding she needed to find her own way to whatever lay between them. I've spent 2 years proving I don't need anyone's help, she continued. Proving that a woman alone can succeed where others failed. It became my purpose, my identity. She met his gaze. But I'm beginning to think there's a difference between needing help and wanting companionship. There is, Gabriel agreed quietly. I don't need you to save my ranch, Katherine said, her voice strengthening, but I might want you beside me while I do it myself. The slow smile that spread across Gabriel's face warmed her more than the rising sun. I think I could live with that arrangement. They rode back to the ranch as morning light gilded the prairie. The cattle had scattered during the gunfire but hadn't strayed far. They would round them up later, Katherine decided. For now, there were more important matters. At the cabin, they dismounted, both exhausted from the night's events. Gabriel took her hand as they walked to the porch. Katherine, he said, his voice serious again, what I told you is true. About Michaels, about why I was running. But Morgan's right, I can't keep running forever, especially if I'm going to stay here. Then we'll clear your name, she said simply. Gabriel looked surprised. Just like that? No, Katherine admitted. Not just like that. It will be difficult, maybe dangerous, but nothing worthwhile comes easily. She squeezed his hand. And you don't have to do it alone anymore. Gabriel pulled her into an embrace, his arms strong around her. I've been alone for so long, he murmured against her hair. I'd almost forgotten how it feels to have someone on my side. Katherine lifted her face to his. Get used to it, Gabriel Adams. I'm not easily discouraged. His kiss held promise and possibility, a future neither of them had imagined a week ago. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. They finished the barn, stronger than before. They rounded up the scattered cattle and prepared for the drive to market. And in the evenings, they planned. Gabriel wrote to his sister in Philadelphia, asking her to contact a former Army comrade who had become a Pinkerton detective. If anyone could help clear his name, it would be someone with resources and connections beyond the frontier. Katherine rode into town to speak with Sheriff Mills, explaining the situation with the bounty hunters and the case of mistaken identity. The sheriff was skeptical but agreed to make inquiries. Might be easier if he just changed his name, Mills commented. Plenty of men out here running from something. He's not running anymore, Katherine replied firmly. He's standing his ground. The cattle drive went smoothly, and the prices were better than Katherine had dared hope. She paid Thompson his money every cent and had enough left to make improvements to the ranch. Thompson's face when she counted out the cash had been satisfying indeed. You got lucky this time, Miss Armstrong, he said stiffly as he pocketed the money. Katherine smiled coolly. Not luck, Mr. Thompson, hard work and good planning. As fall approached, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Gabriel read it with Katherine looking over his shoulder, their hands clasped tightly. The Pinkerton is looking into it, Gabriel said, hope evident in his voice. And there's more. A man matching the description from the Casper robbery was arrested in Denver. He had identification papers in 3 names. One of them yours? Katherine asked. Gabriel nodded grimly. Among others, they're questioning him about the bank job. It was a thread that might eventually lead to clearing his name. Not a resolution, but hope where there had been none before. As they sat on the porch that evening, watching sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson, Katherine reflected on how much had changed in 2 months. The barn stood strong and complete. The ranch was secure for another season. And she was no longer alone. Gabriel's arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. Penny for your thoughts, she leaned into him, savoring his warmth against the evening chill. I was thinking about the day you rode up, how determined I was to send you away, he chuckled. You were formidable. Still are. I thought needing help meant I was failing, she admitted. That accepting it somehow diminished what I was trying to prove. And now, Katherine looked up at him. Now I think there's strength in knowing when to stand alone and when to stand together. Gabriel kissed her forehead gently. Wise woman. I'm learning, she said, smiling. Slowly. The next morning, Katherine woke to find Gabriel already outside, splitting firewood for the coming winter. She watched him from the doorway, admiring the easy strength in his movements, the focus in his expression. He had agreed to stay through winter to help with the ranch while they waited for news from the Pinkerton. Beyond that, they made no definite plans. The future still held uncertainties: Gabriel's legal situation, the ranch's ongoing challenges, the adjustment to sharing their lives after years of independence. But as Katherine stepped out into the crisp autumn air, she felt a certainty she hadn't known in years. Whatever came, they would face it together. Gabriel looked up, smiling when he saw her. He set down the axe and walked to meet her. Good morning, he said, his voice still carrying traces of wonder whenever he greeted her, as if each day he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. It is, she agreed, slipping her arms around his waist. Over his shoulder, she could see the new barn standing proud against the sky, the cattle grazing in the distance, the endless prairie stretching toward possibilities neither of them had imagined before fate or chance had brought them together. You know, Gabriel said thoughtfully, I never did thank you. For what? His blue eyes crinkled at the corners. For letting me be here anyway. Katherine laughed, the sound carrying across the land that was still hers, that they now shared in all the ways that mattered. I think we both got the better end of that bargain. As they walked hand in hand toward the day's work, Katherine thought of all the sunrises and sunsets stretching before them, some easy, some difficult, all faced together. No longer simply surviving alone, but building something stronger than either could create on their own. The ranch that had once represented her solitary determination now stood as testament to a different kind of strength, the courage to open her heart, to trust, to love. Not because she needed to, but because she chose to. And in that choice, Katherine had found the greatest freedom of all.